The following is a Spirit Street production.
The more and more the days go by, the more and more we're hearing just reported rumors, confirmed rumors that the ACC, maybe not collapse, but teams are absolutely going to leave the ACC. Big 12's got to be interested, man. We're going to talk about that again today. Appreciate everybody being in here. This is the Big 12 Insiders.
Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Now let's go to booming North Texas, home of Studio 73. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
All right, welcome back to the Big 12 Insiders. This is your man, Big B, Brien Hanley, along with Tim Fitzgerald. Fitz, how you doing today, my man?
I'm good, brother. It's a busy day for the Fitzmeister. I have no idea why I called myself that. I never want to do that again. It's a busy day. I'm kind of running from radio spot to show to recording another show. It's going to be a fun day, but I wore my green today, and you know why. And so I'm fired up about this day. And I'd like to compliment you on your shirt.
Yes.
It's very advanced thinking. Your school, Louisville, will be in.
The thing is that, you brought this to my attention right before, we started talking, recording, and somebody questioned and said that I wasn't from Louisville. I'm like, I mean, first of all, and I'll just ask this to anybody. Has anybody ever made up that, hey, man, I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and been lying about that? I just don't know.
It's so weird.
You're
from Louisville.
Just like, okay, but for anybody out there, yes, technically though, Fitz, I am from Jeffersonville, Indiana, which happens to be 1 mile across the Ohio River from Louisville. I go, so technically they're right. I'm not from Louisville. However, I do live closer to downtown Louisville. My mother lives closer to downtown Louisville than my aunt, my grandmother, basically our entire family that do happen to live in Louisville. So just something to throw out there. So
yeah, I guess if you live in Leawood, you live in Kansas City. So
there you go.
We'll give you that too.
But let's get down to it, man. Today we are going to talk again about realignment, Big 12 expansion. Let's just cover the Big 12 portion of it. I do want to point out at the very beginning here, I know we're talking about this a lot. Just like a lot of people are out here talking about it, at least from the Big 12 insiders perspective. We've said this a couple of times, Fitz, and I want to make sure that everybody understands. We are not rooting for the ACC to collapse. We are 100% not rooting for that. I've been on record, Fitz has been on record saying, I'd like it to go back the way it was. I would want the Pac-12 to be around. I don't want the ACC to implode. I don't want any of that stuff to happen. However, we got to live in reality. And since we do live in reality, this is what's happening. So as long as that's what's going on, we're going to continue to talk about it and bring you guys the latest as far as what we know.
Yeah, I don't think the Big 12 is interested in going behind anyone's back and stealing programs. I saw that Greg Sankey said the SEC wouldn't do that, except that's exactly what they did with Texas and Oklahoma. And the Big 10 set off the last version of it by taking USC and UCLA. So the Big 12 has been more victim than oppressor in this whole realignment game. And we've been covering it. Me as a journalist has been covering this, long before any of this. Go back to the 2010 and before we were covering this stuff. And so when Big 12 folks, and I think the Pac-12 learned this last year, maybe, when we talk about things, we have a pretty damn good understanding of what needs to take place for a conference to survive and what the warning signs are that a conference is about to collapse, because we've seen it up close. Big 12 should have collapsed and somehow pulled itself out of it, and 4 schools didn't go to the Pac-12. And we're just really familiar with this. We're not trying to ruin these conferences at all, but because we know what it's like. Let's be honest, Big B, we thought Kansas State, Iowa State, and some others would be Washington State and Oregon State, just left out. So, we'd prefer everything to go back to regional conferences, but that dog is long down the block. Yeah, it's running away. So that's not going to happen. And the Big 12 offers a really good landing spot for programs that find themselves in this situation, like the Four Corners did from the Pac-12.
Yes, absolutely. Let's dig into it a little bit. I think, we talked about Florida State. We've talked about Clemson. I mean, we basically talked about everybody, but let's just kind of hammer in on some of the stuff here. I think Florida State and Clemson are leaving, and I don't think there's any ifs, ands, or buts about that. That is going to happen. Now, I was on record. We talked about this. I believe it was Monday, and I said, hey, I think it's going to happen before football season starts. And then there was some pushback and other publications out there. But I still think that's the truth, Fitz. I think we're going to hear, first of all, football isn't starting next week. Okay, so that's number one. We got a whole nother month, actually about 6 weeks before football officially starts. So until the first ball is kicked off, we got some time. And I still believe that we're going to hear some news about those two teams. There's going to be some rumblings that come out that those two teams are out. Do you think that they're going to have to buy? Now, you've heard about the buyout, about 150, 500 million, whatever the case may be. I don't think it's going to be anywhere close to that, Fitz. I think when the dust settles, just like we heard yesterday, the reports are that Florida State is going to get exactly what they're looking for, basically to peel back that onion and see what all this Grantorite stuff that the ACC supposedly was hiding. They're going to be able to see that. And when they do, and when their lawyers get in there, I don't think the buyout's going to be anywhere close to $150 million, Fitz. I just don't believe that.
I'm with you. I don't think it's going to be, if you're an ACC fan outside of those two schools, you don't want them to leave because their importance.
Yep.
But you also have to be realistic. They want to leave. They really do. They're extremely unhappy in their setup of earning money in that conference, mostly because it's a bad TV deal. But it's your TV deal. Mm-hmm. You sign that contract. So now you got to live with it. And I think those two schools will do whatever they have to do to eventually get out. And if the Big 12 really is offering to pay that buyout once it's established, unless it's too steep, then that makes it really tangible. Why would they move? Well, they want out. This gives them a free way to get out if it's possible the Big 12 to pay it. And then they join a conference, and by their addition, that conference gets immediately better and more valuable. And the reports are, and I haven't validated this part of it, that ESPN and Fox are willing to redo the contract if 4 good schools from the ACC switch over. That seems like where we're headed with this. But I would encourage the ACC to quit lashing out at Big 12 and worry about your own house. You've got 2 programs that absolutely want out of your grip. That's your issue. And along with that horrible TV deal, do what you can to solve that. Do whatever you need to do to save them and keep them in the conference. That's what the Big 12 ended up doing with Texas and Oklahoma at one point. It was at least a short-term solution, and it paid off. It really did.
Well, here's the thing. ACC's lashing out because they know what's coming.
Yep.
And they're trying to pin blame on the Big 12 and say that it's the Big 12 is trying to poach our teams and yada, yada, yada. No, it's not. And we all know that. You just said it, Fitz. That bad TV deal is what this is all about. Because the one thing that I know for an absolute fact is that if Florida State and Clemson were getting $60 million a year from the ACC, there would be no talk about them trying to leave the ACC. There would be none of that because they only want out because they want more money. They don't care what conference they're in. Give me a break. That has nothing to do with this on what conference they're in. They're mad because they see the Big Ten. They see the SEC. Heck, if you look at Clemson, Clemson's just looking down the road at South Carolina, and they're like, well, hold on a second. We're a much better program than they are. How are they getting double the money that we are? How does that work? Florida State is looking within. They're looking up the road at Florida. Look, Florida obviously is a good program, but over the last decade, we've been a much better program than they have been. How are they getting double the money? We can't keep up with this. Well,
Yep.
this is how.
It's
And so
crazy.
for them, the ACC to be screaming at the rooftops, and they're just whining about the Big 12. Look, first of all, think about this, Fitz. When has the last time that the Big 12 has been put on this type of a pedestal where another conference is blaming them for trying to poach their teams? That's when you know you're in trouble. Big 12 has never been accused of that, and they're not doing it in this case, but now we've got the ACC upset about it. To me, it's just laughable.
Yeah, well, you certainly had some Pac-12 accounts accusing the Big 12 of that. And I would like to point out that it was entirely possible that conference was going to stick together until the Big Ten took Oregon and Washington.
And whose fault
I
was
mean,
that?
yeah, that's not the Big 12's fault. I sincerely believe if Oregon and Washington had opted not to leave, that conference was going to survive, that they would have done what the Big 12 did and pulled together. You got to close up your ranks. If your ranks are not in line, it's going to be a mess. And I know nobody wants to give up some of their money to help keep Florida State and Clemson, but you're about to give up maybe half of your money if you lose them. And if they lose enough schools and fall below I think it's 15 they're required to have in that contract, ESPN can tear it up and say, okay, here's what you're worth now. And I don't think they want that. And
no,
they need to stop Florida State and Clemson from leaving. But I also believe this, Big B, that once they find a way to get out, and if that number, their buyout isn't as severe as some think, I still think that one of those two conferences might go, okay, now we want you.
Right.
And they're letting the Big 12 kind of sort this all out to see if it's possible to get them out. We'll find out. But again, I've said this a number of times, I don't think those two schools fit either conference that they want to be in. And let's be clear, they want to be in the SEC or Big Ten. Who wouldn't? But the Big Ten is all about those academics. Neither one of them's AAU. I know they say they'll let in schools that aren't, but they don't.
No.
I mean, Nebraska didn't have it because they lost it after they joined.
Right.
And I really see the SEC wanting to continue to expand its footprint. And I think that's why North Carolina and Virginia are probably the top two schools they want. Maybe they want Virginia Tech, but those are two giant state schools, huge followings. Virginia's down on its luck a little bit, but there's no reason it has to be. It completes the southern, belt for them. Honestly, I don't see them going back into South Carolina and Florida to add other teams. I just don't see it. I don't think they feel like that's going to push the ball forward. Even though those are better football programs, understand this. The SEC doesn't need better football programs. They have other things they want to accomplish here, which is kind of Southern dominance, and this is an opportunity to do that.
Correct. And, just talking about it, and here's, before we take our first break, the schools in the ACC, there was a lot of back and forth going on Twitter, people talking about it. The ACC has 4 teams bring up 50% of the football viewership. 4 teams. Think about that for a second. With a conference with that many people, 4 teams: Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and Louisville. That has 50% of the viewership. If they leave, first of all, that conference would never recover. But I got to believe even out of that 50%, I don't know what the numbers are, but I would bet you 35 to maybe even 50% of that 50% are Florida State. And it's more than that. I would bet it's 65%, 65, maybe even 70% are Florida State and Clemson of that 50. So if you're going to lose that, that's a problem. That's a big problem.
Really
and you're right. They got to close the ranks. But I don't think, here's the thing. It's almost like they're infighting and don't know what they're doing because the other schools won't agree to that. So it's like, why wouldn't you agree? You need them to stay relevant. And you need them to stay relevant, but you won't give up what you are getting to stay relevant. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand that, Fitz. I really don't.
I don't either. I really don't. You need to give them more money or you're going to lose a lot of money because if they leave, you'll be worse off, far worse off than you would be if they stayed and got a bigger cut.
Right.
But I also am confident that unless there's a wholesale raid of the ACC, that conference is going to survive. There's
Yeah,
enough
well,
good schools in that area. And let's be honest, they probably would immediately invite in Washington State and Oregon State to add some more weight out west. They should change their name to the All Coast Conference.
mhm.
But Tulane, South Florida, get you on the Gulf. You're going to cover all the coasts. So I think they'll survive, and I think they'll be a pretty good conference. And what they're going to discover is when you elevate a program like TCU was elevated, they get competitive real quick.
Right.
Now they have the money. They were pretty good. If they're pretty good without the money, wait till they get better money.
Yep.
And then they're going to close it up. And I just hate this condescending attitude. Well, you just added a bunch of non-power schools. Well, the schools the Big 12 added a year ago are all better overall than some of the schools in the ACC. They just got some schools that honestly are no longer Power 5 institutions.
Yep.
And they probably need to be relegated down to whatever it is, but we'll just see how this plays out. And it's I think the ACC really needs to reflect on what it wants to be as a conference.
Correct.
Because now they're getting wound up into academics, and okay, we heard so much of this from the Pac-12, and yeah, the Pac-12 did blame the Big 12 for everything going on, even though it wasn't. It was the easier conference to call corrupt or whatever you want to say, because you don't want to piss off the SEC and Big Ten if you're hoping to get in. So we'll let this play out, but we're going to talk about it a lot because people want as much information as possible.
Absolutely. We're going to take one quick break here. We'll come back on the other side and dig in a little bit on the Big 12 side of this and what it can mean for the Big 12, and then who, the realistic schools that the Big 12 can be looking to add here. One word from our sponsor, Synergy Financial Group. We'll be right back.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the mission is to change the way Americans plan for their financial future. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's return to Studio 73.
All right, welcome back to Big 12 Insiders. Again, this is Big B, Brien Hanley, along with Tim Fitzgerald. Fitz, I'm going to go back just real quick to something that you said before the break, talking about, the schools that the Big 12 added last year are better overall. 100% true. Here's my other thoughts on that. At least two of the schools, maybe more, Cincinnati and BYU. I believe that those schools and athletic programs were on the Power 5 level, just got left out of being Power 5. Cincinnati has been playing big time basketball for a long, long time. It just wasn't in the Big Ten, SEC, or ACC, but they were playing big time basketball. We saw what their football program looked like under Luke Fickell. Can they get back to that? Maybe. We'll see. That's a different conversation for a different day, but they just got left out. And we know what BYU brings to the table. That fan base is absolutely insane. It's everywhere. I just believe those were two schools that just hadn't gotten the opportunity, especially Cincinnati. They just hadn't gotten the opportunity, but they were technically Power 5s. They were just on the outside looking in, and now they're not. And it's going to change everything for them.
Yep, I agree. And I think UCF is maybe the biggest growth potential of any school in the United States.
Absolutely.
And they've got an enormous young alumni base. They're cranking out alumni at a frightening rate because their enrollment's so big. And when those people get invested in the programs, it's going to be epic. And now that Houston's hired Willie Fritz, we're all fearful that he's going to ignite that program with all that Houston talent. But, also if you're the Big 12, an opportunity to reinforce your presence in Florida is really important. I mean, if you have multiple schools in Florida and Texas, the recruiting implications of that are enormous. And if those states kind of feel like you're their conference in many ways, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So, and the wild card in this is I truly believe A&M wants to get out of the SEC and go to the Big
100.
Ten because
Absolutely.
Big Brother showed up.
Yep.
I can't believe they're basically going to admit that they don't want to be in a conference with Texas. I mean, it's just strange. They're literally running away again if they do this. But, that might affect what the SEC wants to do with the ACC if they do. They'll have to backfill. Will it come to Oklahoma State? I doubt it. But I think they might take another ACC school. We'll see. I feel bad for these fans, but let's be really honest. If I'm adding schools right now, if I'm the Big 12 and I have to add some schools, I would take South Florida and I don't know, maybe UNLV over Wake, Syracuse, or Boston College.
Yeah.
Those brands have aged out. They have fallen off the end of the table. Wake has played some pretty good football in recent history, but they won't get recruited by another Power Five. That nobody would want them, and that's the simple truth of it. And we'll see if maybe when they reform, they'll grab some other schools. I don't think so. I think they're going to be a non-power conference, but a very good non-power conference.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of the way I look at it too. But it's what the ACC is going to be left. We'll see. Digging in to what the Big 12 would be looking at. We talked about it on Monday. Florida State, Clemson, it makes sense. Miami, Louisville, it makes sense. There's some pushback with Miami and Louisville.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Miami. Oh, go ahead, Fitz. Go ahead.
There's talk that the other two will be NC State and Virginia Tech,
right?
Which are great fits. They're better social fits. They're very Big 12 like institutions. So I can see that. I think there's concerns about Miami absolutely being a bad fit for the Big 12. Just in how the fans don't care. That honestly,
right?
Unless they're really, really good, the fans don't show up, and there's a big empty NFL stadium.
Right.
So I think there's a thought that Miami draws eyeballs, but we don't feel like they fit our culture at all.
They wouldn't.
I think Louisville fits it, even though it's more of a urban setting school.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's down to 6, and maybe if you throw in Pitt as 7, but Pitt's making it pretty clear that they don't want anything to do with the Big 12 because it's a bad conference. So, I don't quite understand that. But next week, I'm going to have on a buddy of mine, JJ Kitchen, who covers Pitt, and I'll have him on to talk about that view of things and the Big 12. So that'll be something for next week.
Yeah, to me, it just seems like, and I'll dive into the Miami thing. Everything about Miami says they are terrible for the Big 12 outside of branding. Mm-hmm. And everything that we've heard here lately, Fitz, is that branding isn't that big of a deal anymore. Is that it's not about the branding aspect. It's okay, what's the good fit, or going to markets isn't that big of a deal. It's, hey, this has got to be a good fit for us. What does it do? Well, people are still watching Miami football, and they still watch it all over the country. So you can say whatever you want, that maybe the brand isn't as good as what it was, and maybe, their football hasn't been as good, and maybe the market, it's not that big of a deal, which I don't know why people would think Miami market isn't that big of a deal, because I think it is. But if you really dig into it, University of Miami fans, I would say the majority of them don't live in Miami. They're from all over the country. So I think it's just odd. I think the best thing that Miami could do is build an on-campus stadium. If they found out and built an on-campus stadium, and it doesn't have to be 60,000 people, because they're not going to get 60. Their biggest games, they don't get 60,000 people. Even when they host Florida State, make it 45,000, 50,000 max. I don't even know if you need 50. Make it 45,000 and just fill the thing up. Okay, fine. Do that. I go, but if they do that, then we can start talking about it. I would take, if you were asking me, I would take Louisville and NC State. Now, you're going to say, well, Brien, you're a homer. You love Louisville. I do. But it just makes sense. They're first of all, the geography works. And I go, if you're talking about branding, okay, great. I know branding doesn't mean that much anymore, or supposed to not mean that much anymore, but it does. And a lot of people watch Louisville football, and even more people watch Louisville basketball, even though they've stunk the last couple of seasons. So they're a fit. NC State's a fit. Now, NC State and Louisville are kind of similar because they're both in an urban setting, because NC State's in Raleigh, and Raleigh's big. So, they're in the same kind of setting. They would fit together. And again, that whole geography there, it works. Virginia Tech kind of fits more the mold of the Big 12 because Blacksburg, kind of out in the middle of nowhere, college town, not kind of out in the middle of nowhere. It is out in the middle of nowhere. But having said that, I would still take NC State and Louisville even before I took Miami Fitz. That's the route that I would go. I really, really would if I'm the Big 12. If I'm the Big 12.
Well, short of Clemson and Florida State, I think NC State is my favorite pick out of that conference to fit into the Big 12. First of all, their athletics last year were unbelievable.
Yes, they were.
And I think everyone who experienced, the cross of fans at the Pop-Tarts Bowl, it was like the meme of, what is it, Robin or Spider-Man pointing at each other.
Right.
They're the same kind of fan base. And interacting with them on Twitter, they're getting hostile. I'm like, well, that's pretty much how K-State fans would react. I just think there's some really good fits out of there. And let's also remember there's one unverified rumor that the Big 12 would take more than 4. Right. I find that hard to believe, but it's out there. I think, like I said, I think that if you get Florida State and Clemson, there's at least 4 other schools that you would want. And Miami, just on sheer, branding of it's a national program, like you said. And also I'm going to throw this in. I don't know if this is even a consideration, but Brett Yormark is really invested in the Big 12 Mexico initiative, which I think is not just about Mexico. It's about Spanish speaking fans, because there's a growing number in the United States. Western Kansas certainly has a lot of Spanish speaking fans. So, Kansas State's now doing Spanish language broadcasts for home games. Adding Miami would play into that. It's, Spanish speakers, not from Mexico necessarily, but it gives you some of that feeling. And I think that's probably a consideration in this at some point, because you get down to that. You get down to these fine things that what the presidents want. And always remember, folks, it's the presidents and chancellors who make these final decisions.
Yes.
So they might look at things in a totally different way than you as a sports fan would look.
Right. Well, and it comes down to dollar and cents and what's going to make the most for their particular school. While it's a conference and you want everything to be harmonious within the conference, it still comes down to what's best for our university. And whatever is best for their university, that's what they're going to do. And to be quite honest with you, that's their job. Yeah. Their job is to do what's best for their individual university. As, selfish as it might sound, but that's literally what they're hired for, to advance what's going on at the university, whether it's athletically, whether it's fundraising, academically. So it's just what their job is. We're going to take a final break here. We'll be back and we'll kind of end this. And again, just kind of dig into a little bit as far as the Big 12, what the advantage is and how they can try to secure some of these schools. We'll be right back after a word from our partners, Synergy Financial Partners.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the vision is to build the world's largest consumer financial education and empowerment company. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's return to Studio 73.
All right, welcome back to Big 12 Insiders. Again, people, we are talking about the expansion of the Big 12, the possible expansion of the Big 12, and the possible realignment or / collapse of the ACC. we talked again about it on Monday, Fitz, on how the Big 12 is going to try to pull this off. A couple of months back, we were talking about how they were going to be able to do this. What schools? It was a pipe dream of getting Florida State and Clemson. Absolute pipe dream. Well, it's not a pipe dream anymore.
No.
And private equity is a big part of that. And we touched on it on Monday. And I think it's important that we touch on it again, because I know the big perception of most people is when you think private equity, you think of buying something, tearing it apart, getting a majority, and then selling it off for scraps. And that's not how private equity made their money, though, Fitz.
No.
That's not how they make their money. They invest in something, but they just add an influx of money to help you go. Think Shark Tank, people, when you think private equity. Think Shark Tank. The Shark Tank, those guys aren't investing in something just to sell it for scraps. That's not what they're doing, to tear it apart. They're investing in it so this thing will grow and eventually sell this thing. I go, but that's a company. They want this to grow, the conference to grow and grow and grow so they can make money. That's what private equity does on the other side of it. And I would say the majority side of it. And that's how they're going to be able to get these teams, because if they get double what they're getting from the ACC, Florida State and Clemson will be in the Big 12. And I don't care what anybody else is saying. Oh, that can't happen this year. No, they're not going to leave and start playing this year, but it could happen next year.
Yep.
I have no qualms about saying it can happen next year. We just saw what happened to the Pac-12. We didn't think that was going to happen, and lo and behold, it did. So, yeah, private equity gets involved, and I think it's probably already involved. We just don't know the details because some of this stuff keeps getting leaked out. I think Florida State and Clemson, if all this shakes out, I think they're in the Big 12 next year.
Yeah, I won't be surprised. Let's touch on this and that really crappy TV deal the ACC has. And granted, they're thumping their chests over the ACC network being profitable and all that. I don't know what ESPN would do with that channel. I really don't. I can see them maybe just buying it back and converting it to another platform to show games on, and not make it branded for one conference. But the Big 12 starts a new, the schools are getting paid essentially the same between the two conferences per school. And the Big 12 starts a new contract next year, which goes up. Not as much as probably it should have, but Brett Yormark wisely took the deal and took it off the table for the Pac-12, and that kind of decided who's surviving. But the Big 12 goes through another negotiation in 2030 while the ACC is still on this deal. And I don't see any way they're going to escape it, but I can see ESPN looking at this and saying, well, if 4 schools move across, that contract can be voided and we're going to negotiate them way down. And it's just business to them. It's absolute business. They don't care how they carve up college football historically, geographically, or anything else. What makes them money? That's all this is all about. This is the biggest greed play I've ever seen in college sports. Whether it's the networks or the universities, you got to have money to keep up. And if you're not keeping up, you're not going to get more money. It's just kind of a vicious cycle. This is the Big 12's lone shot, short of the miracle of Notre Dame joining, which won't ever happen. This is their lone shot to close the gap on those two conferences. There's nothing else out there that will do that.
Nope. This is it.
This is it.
A chance, and I don't think they're going to blow it either, Fitz. I do want to attach that, or not attach, but talk about that Notre Dame. That there was a lot of people in the comments section that were talking about, well, Notre Dame, this is their chance. They'll save the ACC. Yeah, no, they're not.
No.
Notre Dame just renegotiated their contract with NBC. Notre Dame has their own network, and it's NBC.
Yeah.
They get $50 million a year. It was 25. They re-upped. It's $50 million. Plus they get $17 million from the ACC because they're in it for all the other sports minus football. Notre Dame's not saving the ACC. They don't have to. First of all, they have their own network. If they went to the Big Ten, they would tell the Big Ten, hey, look, we've got money coming from NBC. We're not giving that up. But we won't take as much from you guys. Sure, we'll go plant there, but we also want some of that money too. So the Big Ten would take them in a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
Heartbeat. So don't think that the Notre Dame, first of all, they're not coming to the Big 12. They're 1,000% not going to save the ACC either. So like you don't even need to say that because that is not going to happen. They're not saving the ACC. They would lose money if they tried to do that. It wouldn't make any sense. If somebody, I read in the comments, well, they would make their own schedule. I'm like, they make their own schedule now. And I go, and they play all these teams now. They don't have to be in a conference.
No.
And not only the college football playoff allowed them to be a part of this thing. So if they're allowing Notre Dame to be a part of this, they're not joining a conference anytime soon. Not anytime soon, people. So you got to leave that out of it. But you're right. This is 100% the Big 12's chance. This is their shot to try. And they're not going to be on an even playing field with the Big 10 and the SEC. They're not. But they can catch up. They can get as close as they can possibly be. And this is their opportunity to be able to do that. Because, look, while we don't want to say it, more money means more everything for your university. So if you're getting more money, you get better facilities, it's going to end up getting you better recruits. That's just the way all of this works. You get on TV more. All of these things work in your favor, and it's all good for the Big 12. So while we don't want the ACC to collapse, Fitz, we don't want that to happen. But it's a reality. It's happening, whether we want it or not. And since that is what's happening, we want Florida State and Clemson to come. You know, we want them to come because as soon as they do, all the other schools in the Big 12 are immediately going to benefit because they're going to get more money. I think that's what people aren't realizing. I think they think they're going to take some of the pie that they're getting. And I'm like, that will get renegotiated based on who's coming into the conference.
Right.
They're going to get more. They're going to get more. It's going to benefit them. It's not going to hurt them. And I don't think enough people know that, Fitz.
Yeah. Look, if the two conferences are equal in payout per school right now or close to it, you take the best brands out of one and add them to the other, it's going to be a big discrepancy.
Yes.
And the only way the Big 12 does this is if ESPN and Fox are open to renegotiating. They don't have the money to just bring in more schools.
Correct.
Then the schools will be making less than the ACC. So that makes no sense. The only way it's possible is if the networks allow it and compensate for it. And, honestly, they can probably lessen their expense with the ACC with what's left of it. So it's going to be an interesting month or two leading up to football because, I know a lot of ACC people want to say this isn't happening, but we've had reporting now by really credible national sources, let alone our friend Jason Shear at Arizona, who has a wonderful source. I would like to meet his source. And this is going on. I'm sorry if you don't believe it. We heard this last year from the Pac-12. Nothing was going on. This was all made up. And it wasn't. And it's not this time.
Nope, it's not made up. It's happening. Again, unfortunate, but it's just reality, people. It's just what reality is the forces are pushing this forward with regardless of what kind of resistance. But if you're asking me to make an analogy of this is like a mosquito trying to stop a freight train. That's what I believe is going on here. It's like mosquitoes trying to stop a freight train. It's going to happen. It's not even going to slow down. So it's just, I don't know. It's bad, but look, we cover the Big 12 and I want what's best for the Big 12 and bringing these schools over with Florida State and Clemson leading the charge. That is what is best for the Big 12 in this case, though, Fitz. So.
Agreed.
All right, everybody. Well, I appreciate everybody joining again. As always, thank you guys. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, and especially leave those comments. Again, I love going back and forth with you, so appreciate all of that. Until next time, I am off next week, by the way. So it's just going to be Fitz. I am off all next week. My wife is forcing me to go on a vacation. I didn't want to go.
She's so mean to you.
Me. I know. It's just selfish of me. But she's forcing me to go, so I got to go. So I'll be gone next week. I will miss all you guys. Don't worry. I will still get in those comments. Don't worry. I'll still do that. So I appreciate everybody. Thank you guys, and I will talk to you guys later. You guys have a good one.
This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.